Jaya Girivaradari, Jaya Gopijana Vallabha, Jaya Girivaradari, Jaya Girivaradari, Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhavam, Jaya Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhavam, Jaya Kunja Bihari, Jaya Gopijana Vallabha, Jaya Girivaradari, Jaya Girivaradari, Jaya Gopijana Vallabha, Jaya Girivaradari, Jaya Girivaradari, Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhavam, Jaya Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhavam, Jaya Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Radha Madhava ki jai, Ashtasa ki Shriman Mahaprabhu ki jai, Giri Govardhan ki jai, Nrsimhadev Bhagavan ki jai, Pancha Tattva ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vāsudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vāsudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vāsudevaya. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudirayet nashta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttamashloke bhaktir bhavati naistiki. Reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, 2nd Canto, Chapter 6, Purusha-sukta confirmed, verse 32. Sṛjāmi, tan-niyukto, aham, haro, harati, tad-vaśaḥ, viśvam, puruṣa-rūpeṇa, paripāti, tri-śakti-dhṛk, sṛjāmi tan-niyukto haro harati tad-vaśaḥ, viśvam puruṣa-rūpeṇa, paripāti tri-śakti-dhṛk, sṛjāmi tan-niyukto haro harati tad-vaśaḥ, viśvam puruṣa-rūpeṇa, paripāti tri-śakti-dhṛk. Puruṣa-rūpeṇa, paripāti tri-śakti-dhṛk, haro harati, viśvam puruṣa-rūpeṇa. Okay, thank you. Word for word. Sṛjāmi, do create. Tat, by his. Niyuktaḥ, appointment. Aham, I. Haraḥ, Lord Shiva. Harati, destroys. Tat-vaśaḥ, under his subordination. Viśvam, the whole universe. Puruṣa, the personality of Godhead. Rūpeṇa, by his eternal form. Paripāti, maintains. Tri-śakti-dhṛk, the controller of three energies. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Ki Jai. By His will I create, Lord Shiva destroys, and He Himself, in His eternal form, as the personality of Godhead, maintains everything. He is the powerful controller of these three energies. Purport. The conception of one without a second is clearly confirmed here. The one is Lord Vāsudeva, and only by his different energies and expansions are different manifestations both in the material and in the spiritual worlds maintained. In the material world also, Lord Vāsudeva is everything, as stated in the Bhagavad-gītā 7:19. Vāsudeva sarvam iti. Everything is Vāsudeva only. In the Vedic hymns also, the same Vāsudeva is held to be supreme. It is said in the Vedas, Vāsudevat paro Brahmā, na chanyo rto sti tad-vaśaḥ. In fact, there is no greater truth than Vāsudeva. And Lord Kṛṣṇa affirms the same truth in the Bhagavad-gītā 7:7, Mata parataram nanyat. There is nothing above me, Lord Kṛṣṇa says. So the conception of oneness, as overly stressed by the impersonalists, is also accepted by the personalist devotee of the Lord. The difference is that the impersonalist denies personality in the ultimate issue, whereas the devotee gives more importance to the personality of Godhead. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam explains this truth in the verse under discussion. Lord Vāsudeva is one without a second, but because he is all-powerful, he can expand himself as well as display his omnipotencies. The Lord is described here as omnipotent by three energies, tri-śakti-dhṛk. So primarily his three energies are internal, marginal, and external. This external energy is also displayed in the three modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. Similarly, the internal potency is also displayed in three spiritual modes, Samvit, Sandhini, and Hladini. The marginal potency, or the living entities, is also spiritual, Prakritim, Vidime, Param. But the living entities are never equal to the Lord. The Lord is nirasta-sāmya-atiśaya. In other words, no one is greater than or equal to the Supreme Lord. So the living entities, including even such great personalities as Lord Brahmā and Lord Śiva, are all subordinate to the Lord. In the material world also, in his eternal form of Vishnu, he maintains and controls all the affairs of the demigods, including Brahmā and Śiva. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gurum Tinataranam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shcham Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitam Shcham Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Śrīmad Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindubhya Evacha Patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. He Krishna karuna sindhu dina bandhu jagatpate gopesha gopika kanta radha kanta namostute tapta kanchana gorangi radhe vrindavaneshwari vrishabhanu sute devi pranamami hari priye. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. I need to see my notes. Since I started following Bhagavatam classes, I noticed how important it is to speak in the microphone. Because if you don't hear me, there's no use of anything I have to say. So I will, first note is speak in the microphone. And I want to say how in this verse is explained that religion we follow is a monotheistic religion. And I remember once a friend of mine who sometimes takes guided tours in a temple she lives in. She said, when people come to temple, we tell them we believe in one God and we are monotheistic. But they don't believe us because they see so many personalities on the altar. And they just cannot understand how if we believe in one God, why we have so many persons. And in that specific temple, there was Radha Krishna and Lalita, Vishaka, and Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra, and Gornitai deities. So it's for them difficult to understand how is it that we are believing that the God is one person. And usually the perception of Hinduism is that it is a polytheistic religion. This is how it is perceived. For example, if you check in Wikipedia, if you put, like I was checking these Shiva temples. And of course, the first thing that you read there is that Shiva is one of the three main gods in the Hindu pantheon. So this is something we have problem with, because we don't say that there is such a thing as Hindu pantheon. We say there is only one supreme person, and he is Krishna, and all the other forms are his expansions, and he is also accompanied by his energies. And then all the other energies present in the world are expansions from his internal potency. This is how we explain philosophy. However, most of the people, they associate Hinduism with polytheism. And also in India, this is a common conception that there are 33 million gods, and they are presided by Brahmā, Vishnu, and Śiva. I think this is so, you can confirm. So when we take our vows, initiation vows, one of the, usually in the initiation class, the 10 offenses to the holy names are explained to the initiates. And one of the offenses is to think that Lord Brahmā and Lord Śiva are equal to Lord Vishnu. And then, at least, again, because I used to live in Europe, there usually the guru says, but this is maybe not so important for you because you live in the countries which are traditionally, they have a Christian background. But in India, this is a very, very important point for people who take initiation. It's important for them to understand that our philosophy is that Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, they are not equal to Vishnu, because Vishnu is direct expansion of Krishna. This purport mentions many verses, and sometimes we see that the verses, they're quoted, so we know where they are from, and sometimes they're not quoted. And then, for example, Srila Prabhupada will say, in the Vedas it is said. And then you're left to wonder, where in the Vedas, where is this from? I always notice this because sometimes I do this transcribing service, and then whenever in the speech, in the audio recording, there is some verse in Sanskrit, then you have no other option but to find where it is, because otherwise you would not know how to write it down in a text. So I always admire how the people who were first transcribers of Srila Prabhupada's books, how they were able to find such verses. And for us today it's easy because we have Veda base. And even if we don't find a verse in a Veda base, it's probably gonna come out in Google, so we can find it. And this is one of the way also to read Bhagavatam, especially if we want to research a specific topic, or we want to do research, or we are interested in just studying some particular aspect of our philosophy. Then we can read the purport and then see which verses are quoted, and then we can find those verses from other books and then read those purports also, and then there will be some verses in those purports, and then we can track them down, and so we will find so many verses which actually cover the same topic. So I want to go through these verses that Prabhupada mentions in this purport. Not in the same order, but I somehow have to follow my notes. So this one, verse Vāsudevaḥ paro Brahman niyukto stitatvataha. It's not mentioned where it's from, because it's from the same chapter, actually from chapter 5 to 5:14. The assumption is that we just spoke this verse recently, so everybody remembers it. But of course, it's not possible to remember these verses. So the verse is Dravyam karma chakalascha svabhavo jiva evacha Vāsudevaḥ paro Brahman niyukto stitatvataha. And it says that the 5 elementary ingredients of creation, the interaction thereof set up by eternal time, and the intuition or nature of the individual living beings are all differentiated parts and parcels of the personality of Godhead Vāsudevaḥ, and in truth there is no other value in them. So it is only because of this connection with the Supreme that everything takes place and everything is created. And whatever we see is coming from Him. So all these different Shaktis are mentioned. And then conclusion is that just as we are personalists, and there are basically 2 schools of Veda followers, and one school is our personalists, people who say that supreme absolute truth is supreme person, and it is Krishna. And the other school is the one who says, no, the supreme absolute truth is ultimately impersonal and doesn't it is internal, it is without changes, and doesn't have a form. And it is completely outside of the material world. It is transcendental. So both schools are transcendental. Both schools have the same goal of getting out of material world. And both schools, they use the spiritual science of chanting mantras especially to worship the supreme absolute truth, and also to get out of the material world. So this is because they both follow the same scriptures, shastra, which are revealed in the Vedas. But the personalist school, which is our school, we don't deny the impersonal aspect of the Supreme. We just say that this is his one aspect, and then there is also another aspect, which is that he's person. So these impersonal features of the Supreme are phenomenal manifestations, like mentioned here before, all these elements, interaction of time, nature of individual, and their interactions, and also the effulgence of the body of Vāsudeva. So as the goal of the impersonalist is to merge into this effulgence of the Brahman, so for us we say that this effulgence is nothing but the effulgence of his body, which is transcendental. So his body is, we both schools agree that his body is not material. Just the difference is that they say that outside of material world nothing takes shape, nothing takes form, and we say that, of course, that the Supreme Person, he has body which is spiritual, which is Satchit Ananda, made of knowledge, bliss, and knowledge, bliss, and what is the? Eternity. Yes, thank you. I always, if I don't write something down, I always get blocked. So the next verses here mentioned are, so some are quoted, like this verse from Bhagavad-gītā 7.5, Apareyam itastvanyam prakritim vidime param jiva bhuta mahabhaho yayedam daryate jagat. So this, what is quoted in the purport is prakritim vidime param, that just try to understand that this energy is superior, the energy of the living entities. Besides this inferior nature, or mighty armed Arjuna, there is superior energy of mind, which are all living entities who are struggling with the material nature and are sustaining the universe. So here in the Bhagavad-gītā, Krishna is explaining these three energies, external, internal, and marginal, and that the living entities is the marginal energy. And that the inferior energy, Antaranga Shakti, is matter manifest in different elements. And they are earth, water, fire, air, ether, which are gross, and they are subtle, three subtle: mind, intelligence, and false ego. And these energies are always controlled by the energetic. And there is distinction between the living entities on the Lord. Now, in this purport, in Bhagavad-gītā, this is how we find that even Srila Prabhupada, he didn't finish translating the whole Bhagavatam, but sometimes in the purports we will find that he did translate some of the verses from 10th canto, from after the 13th chapter. So one such verse is this from the Praise of the Personified Vedas, which is 87th chapter. This is verse 30. And I'm going to read it. Aparimita druvas tanubrito yadi sarva gatas tarhina shasya teti niyamo druva ne tarata. Ajani cha yan mayam tad avimucha niyantri bhavet samam anujanatam yad amatam mata dushtataya. O Supreme Eternal, if the embodied living entities were eternal and all-pervading like you, then they would not be under your control. But if the living entities are accepted as minute energies of your lordship, then they are at once subject to your supreme control. Therefore, real liberation entails surrender by the living entities to your control, and that surrender will make them happy. In that constitutional position only can they be controllers. Therefore, men with limited knowledge who advocate the monistic theory that God and the living entities are equal in all respects are actually misleading themselves and others. So what I found interesting here is that this verse spoken by the personified Vedas, but actually by Shukadeva Goswami and heard by Parikshit Maharaj, was spoken 5,000 years ago, and that we only know that the monistic theory is presented by Adi Shankaracharya, who is said to live in the 12th century. So the conclusion is that the monistic theory, just as the Vedas are eternal, so this monistic theory is as an explanation is also eternally there. And he didn't invent this. He didn't invent his philosophy. He just brought it forward from the Vedas. So this is something I find interesting, that that when we speak about the Vedas, that all of these different schools and traditions and sampradayas, they are actually never invented. They just discover something that is already there in the Vedas. So the next verse quoted in the purport is Mata parataram nanyat kinchid asti dhananjaya mai sarvam idam protam sutremani ganaiva. And phrase quoted is Mata parataram nanyat. It means, O conqueror of wealth, there is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me as pearls are strung on a thread. And again, in this is from Bhagavatam, Bhagavad-gītā 7.7, and in this purport also Srila Prabhupada, he is arguing how the understanding that the absolute truth is personal is superior to the understanding that absolute truth is impersonal. And he calls this common controversy, whether the sat is personal or impersonal. And he's, in the purport, he's doing what is called in the Nyaya school of logic, Purva Paksha, which means that, let me just see what, this means building a familiarity with the opponent's view before criticizing it, and doing the presentation of the antithetical view opposing the original statements. So I want to a little bit elaborate how this Purva Paksha is conceived, and I find this analogy how in a court case, for example, somebody is accused of something, let's say a murder, and then there is an advocate who is accusing him, and also there is an advocate who is defending him. And then some evidence is brought forward. And then, for example, the advocate who is defending a person being accused, he might say that there is no evidence. And then the person who is accusing says, no, for example, we found this gun next to the victim and it has fingerprints of the accused, so that is the proof. And then the person defending might say, certainly that's not the proof that he killed him, that's just the proof that he was touching the gun with his fingers, but doesn't necessarily mean that he actually pulled the trigger. So this is how this logic works, back and forth, until some judge or jury, then they decide, okay, this side convinced us, or that side convinced us more. And then the verdict is being made. So in this logical school of Nyaya, the same principle is applied. There are two opposing arguments. And they also use evidence, but the evidence is from Shastra. And thus they quote Shastra to each other, and then they say, in this Shastra, this is what is said, and then the other side says, but in that Shastra, something else is mentioned, and then they go back and forth until one of them either accepts that, okay, yes, you are right, I'm wrong, or either the people who are standing around and then they see, okay, one person is definitely more correct, and thus it is established which philosophy is right, which philosophy is more authentic. So this is what Srila Prabhupada is doing in this purport. He's quoting from Shvatara Upanishad. And he says, so this is what impersonalists say, and this is where they draw their conclusions. Tatoyad utarataram tad arupam anamayam ya etad vidur amritaste bhavanti atetare dukham evapiyanti. In the material world, Brahma, the primeval living entity within the universe, is understood to be the supreme amongst the demigods, human beings, and lower animals. But beyond Brahma, there is the transcendence, who has no material form and is free from all material contaminations. Anyone who can know him also becomes transcendental, but those who do not know him suffer the miseries of the material world. So this is what they say. You see how this is Upanishads, they are Shrutis, they are not, they are never changed. They are heard by the rishis, exactly replicated, written down. And here it says that transcendence doesn't have material form. Therefore, it means that it is impersonal. And then Prabhupada, of course, he argues, yes, we agree that transcendental reality, there are no material forms. But the Supreme Person, he has a spiritual form, which is also transcendental. So there is no, their argument is incomplete. He says it does not apply. Then the next verse quoted in this purport, it's again not, you don't find a number because it was just quoted recently, so we are all supposed to still have it in our memory. And that's from 2nd Canto, 4th chapter. The phrase is nirasta-sāmya-atiśaya, which means that, okay, I have some distraction here. It's monkeys. Okay. Okay, welcome. So what he says is that the equal status of, assumably, of living entities and the Lord is vanquished by the greatness of the Supreme. Namo namaste strishabhaya sattvatam vidura kastaya muhu kuyoginam nirasta-sāmya-atiśaya naradasa svadhamani brahmani ram syate namaha. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto him who is the associate of the members of the Yadu dynasty and who is always a problem for the non-devotees. He is the supreme enjoyer of both the material and spiritual worlds, and he enjoys his own abode in the spiritual sky. There is no one equal to him because his transcendental opulence is immeasurable. And I like here how it says, he's always a problem for the non-devotees. They cannot grasp who Krishna is. They cannot understand him. And then, again, in that purport is quoted this verse from Ishopanishad 15. Hiranmayena patrena satya syapihta mukam tat tvam pushana pavrinu satya dharmaya drishtaye. O Lord, you are the maintainer of everything, both material and spiritual, and everything flourishes by your mercy. Your devotional service or bhakti yoga is the actual principle of a religion, satya dharma, and I am engaged in that service. So kindly protect me by showing me your real face. Please therefore remove the veil of your Brahma Jyoti rays so that I can see your form of eternal bliss and knowledge. This is important that Srila Prabhupada, he always makes sure to quote from Shruti Vedas, because the impersonalists, they don't accept smritis. So they make this distinction that the Vedas, the true Vedas are Shrutis, they are revealed to to rishis as they are. And then smritis are stories, and they consider Mahabharata and the Puranas. They consider stories, and their only purpose is to attract people to the culture of the Vedas. But they do not actually play any part in the actual sadhana or the yogic practice. Their only idea is that these scriptures are there to attract people, to convince them that the Vedas, that we accept the conclusions of the Vedas as the ultimate knowledge. So they don't actually consider that what we are doing, discussing Bhagavatam, that this is of much importance regarding achieving the ultimate goal. And indeed, Shankaracharya, he didn't comment on Bhagavatam, he only commented on Bhagavad-gītā. Somehow, Bhagavad-gītā, they accept, yes, these we comment, these we can accept as Shrutis, but otherwise what they accept is the Upanishads and Vedanta Sutras. And then their practice is to live in an ashram as renunciates and sannyasis preferably, and then have these philosophical discussions on Vedanta Sutras. This is what is their sadhana. And that is why Srila Prabhupada, he would always quote from Shrutis, from Upanishads to show, no, it is also there that the supreme truth is personal, just that they don't want to see it that way. They just pick the Mahavakya statements, which means they pick statements which affirm their interpretation, and then they put emphasis on such statements. And the last verse mentioned here is also from Bhagavad-gītā. Bahunam janmanam ante jnanavan mam prapadyante Vāsudevaḥ sarvamiti samahatma sudurlabha. That after many births and deaths, he who is actually knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all there is. Such a great soul is very rare. So it is already we are not enemies with impersonalists. And when Prabhupada is doing this Purva Paksha, explaining how this is what they say and this is what we say, and through logic explaining how our conclusion is that the Supreme Absolute Truth is person, is actually even more logical than what they are proposing. So this just means that for us devotees, that we should understand our philosophy properly. Otherwise, most of devotees, they come from this impersonal path. Just as we see in Chaitanya Charitamrita that many of associates of Lord Chaitanya, like Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, they were first impersonalists, and then by the preaching of Lord Chaitanya, they came to accept that, yes, the Supreme Lord is the person. So we are not against them in a sense that we see them as our rivals. Rather, we see that all these different philosophical schools which are presented in the Bhagavatam, just like Sankhya and Yoga and Nyaya, they are all like steps on the path to achieving self-realization, and we just take it that the devotional service, pure devotional service, is the ultimate goal. And therefore Lord Chaitanya, he came to establish that this is the ultimate word in the study of the Vedas, in the practice, especially in spiritual practice in this world. Because in Kali Yuga, all these other processes which help people to advance gradually, they are very difficult to perform. That is why in Kali Yuga we need a process that is quick, that can get us out of the material world in spite of all the obstacles, because there are so many circumstances against the spiritual practitioner. It's not possible to practice slowly self-realization. That is why he gave the perfect process for this age, chanting of the holy name. And the issue with the Mayavadis is more in a sense that they misrepresent the leelas of the Supreme Person when he comes to this world. Well, even Lord Chaitanya, he says, Mayavadi Bhashya Shunile Haya Sarvanasha. If you hear from a Mayavadi, then your spiritual life is finished. And we are warned not to hear, especially Katha, from Mayavadi speakers. And as I said, actually they were not supposed to speak Katha, because this is not what their Acharya gave them as practice for spiritual advancement. They are meant to discuss Vedanta Sutras, short statements that are conclusions from all the Vedas. But they do speak Katha. This is what is the problem. If you go on YouTube, you will find many people who are either self-proclaimed gurus or coming from this Mayavadi background, and they don't think that this is not for them. They think, yes, I can speak about Krishna and rasa dance and all the Mahabharata stories. So they all do these presentations, and even they do it as Prabhupada was especially against it. They do it as Bhagavata Saptaha. They speak and they charge money, and then people come and listen. And then their ultimate conclusion is that the Supreme Lord Krishna is ordinary person, and that his associates are also all ordinary persons, and they cannot actually present any point of view how we understand it, that the reason why the Lord appears in this world and why he performs his pastimes is to attract us to go back to Godhead. And this is something that we both have in common with the impersonal school of philosophy, is that we both see that this world is in ignorance, and that we are entrapped in this world of Maya, just as a fish is caught in a net. And the net is made of all these material elements. And then we cannot get out of the net by our own effort. We need the help of the fisherman. Prabhupada says that if the fisherman decides that, oh, look, this fish is caught in the net and is struggling, and let me take it out and put it in the water. For him, this is the easy to do, but for the fish to get entangled is not possible. So this is what the surrender means, that we accept that we actually our only way of getting out of the material world is by surrendering to the Supreme Person. And actually, not only is this a problem that Mayavadi gurus, they speak katha, they misrepresent Puranas, Mahabharata, Ramayana, and all the pastimes of the Lord which are described there, but they don't actually even teach this. If you listen to them carefully, they don't actually even teach that the goal of yoga is liberation. What they teach mostly in different yoga schools is just is some kind of karma kanda, how to live happily in this world, how to be peaceful, how to have good relationships, how to feel good about oneself, and how to be successful, even how to. Their idea is more this gradual concept that so people are in tamas. So we will not tell them that the ultimate goal of yoga is withdrawal of the senses from the sense objects and going to the forest and meditating on different chakras in the body. So that at the time of death, one could chant Om and merge with the Supreme. They don't actually insist on this complete renunciation of which is required of a yogi. Rather, they just promote these karma kanda ideas, how to live a good life. And that is also something that we emphasize, that this is cheating, because the conclusion of the Vedas is very clear that all the rituals and all the karma kanda duties and activities and rules and all this is meant just for the purpose of getting out of the material world, which is always, both in personal and impersonal school, this world is always considered as the world of darkness and the world of ignorance. So that is something that both schools actually, they have in common. So I was speaking a little bit. I may ask if there are some questions or comments.
Just wanted to add that actually there is a difference between two impersonal schools of thought. Mm-hmm. What traditionally existed was the Brahmavada school, which claim that the impersonal conception of God is higher than the personal conception of God. But what Shankaracharya did was something different. He claimed that the forms of the Lord are material. So Mayavada is not classical impersonalism. Impersonalism was previously referred to as Brahmavada, which Shukadeva Goswami, the Kumaras, they were Brahmavadis. But the Mayavadas are actually offenders because they consider the personal form of the Lord to be Maya, product of Maya. So when Prabhupada speaks about impersonalism, generally he refers to the Shankaracharya followers. But as you said, this impersonal conception of God has always existed, but not existed in the form that Shankaracharya has presented. So therefore, when we say that we are not enemies of impersonalism, we are not, but we are enemies of the Mayavadis because they are offenders. A devotee always acts like fire against the offenders because they offend the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, we consider them to be our enemies.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yes, I knew this, that people who are from India, they would know more about this tradition because more familiar. I only know what I learned from books. I don't travel much in India, so yes, because in the West, this usually we find that when Prabhupada was preaching in the West, he was more emphasizing that we are not this body because for people in the West this is the biggest problem. But in India he would speak about this preaching against Mayavadis because for people from Indian background this is the biggest obstacle in accepting our philosophy. Okay, thank you. Is there? Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gora Premanande, Hari Hari Bol, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai.